There we are. Hello everyone, and hopefully you are enjoying our cold chain event here, and welcome to Freightonomics, the cold chain event version. I'm Zach Strickland, Director of Freight Market Intelligence here at FreightWaves, and with me as always, Anthony Smith, Lead Economist. And on this show, if you are not familiar, we discuss the freight markets and combine them into the macroeconomic environment and talk a lot of data, but we'll also bring a lot of context to the data. And on today's show, obviously the topic will be cold chain and what is happening around the COVID environment and the pandemic and how it's influenced things. We're going to have a special guest, Dr. Zach Rogers, here on in just a few minutes to discuss what he's seen. Of course, Zach Rogers, one of the lead developers of the Logistics Managers Index, and he's going to give us some insights into what he has heard and seen in that environment and world. But up first, Anthony, just to get things kicked off, we do tend to talk about the freight markets a little bit, and the reefer markets have been extremely active this fall. Typically, a lot of people think about reefer as, refrigerated trailers, temperature controlled, call them what you will, as, a summertime activity, but actually it is a year-round event. As things get cold, things need to be warmed up too in the winter, but they need to have a certain specific temperature range. And right now, we are seeing reefer rejections going through the roof. Reefer mania, as some have called it, where we see roughly about 45% of the freight that is getting pushed out by the shippers right now on the reefer side are being rejected. So again, an extremely tight time for the reefer market. That's in comparison to roughly around 24% to their van counterparts. So the reefer market's extremely hot, to make a pun, right now. And so, one of the things that we are looking for leading in, the pandemic has really created a new world order, if you will, for a lot of these grocery warehouses. And, it's caused a lot of supply chains to shift here over the last little bit. So some of the things that we will be discussing here in a little while is, we're going to have a vaccine coming out. That's going to have a disruptive impact to a lot of the capacity that is moving throughout the United States and also internationally, obviously. And the story of the day today, if anybody has been checking out their FreightWaves.com, is about will we really need 8,000 jumbo jets to transport COVID vaccines?
That is significant. I mean, we're looking at just the logistics of the vaccine and the impact it's going to have on the economy and the overall, the country and the world. I mean,
8,000.
Yeah.
I mean, some people have even mentioned, if you check this article out by Eric Kulich, our air cargo editorial person, some people have estimated roughly 15,000 will be needed to supply the 9 billion vaccines that are supposed to be needed here over the next year or so to make everybody appropriately protected. And, a lot of this is going to get transported on trucks. Yeah. It's good, but it's going to have to maintain a certain temperature. It's not necessarily that it's got to be super cold, but there's a lot of things that they have not figured out about the vaccine yet, about what type of temperature range it's going to be able to handle, because they haven't developed it yet. Right. And there's dry ice involvement, a very interesting article. And again, it will be interesting to see just what the next little bit does for a lot of, especially as capacity in the overall environment has been extremely tight over the last bit.
Right. I mean, the other thing is I'm really looking forward to at least seeing these jets being in motion or just being active, because it seems like the airline has just been decimated with COVID and travel and everything like that. So interested to see what airlines position themselves properly in order to be taking advantage of this current situation.
Yeah, I mean, the airlines obviously could use any kind of boost that they can get. Right. A lot of them, especially United here in the United States, has transitioned a lot of their capacity to air cargo transportation before people have come back. But we're going to take a short break here for a little bit, so stay tuned to that. And when we return, we will have Dr. Zach Rogers that will give us the insights that we need into what he's seen in overall logistics supply chain management. And welcome back, everybody. So up first, we're going to get to talk to Dr. Zach Rogers of Colorado State University. Of course, for those of you that have viewed before, we have had him on numerous times to discuss what's going on with the Logistics Managers Index, as he is one of the primary contributors and developers of this. So let's bring him on. Dr. Rogers, hello and welcome.
Hey guys, how are you doing today?
Just great. How's the temperature in Colorado?
Well, we're alternating between pretty cold and being on fire, so it's not a lot of gray area.
Right, yeah. Y'all have not been strangers to wildfires this year, unfortunately, either. So, Dr. Rogers, let us, for those of our audience that may not have watched Freightonomics before, give us a quick intro to yourself and the Logistics Managers Index.
Okay, well, first of all, welcome everybody to the #1 logistics economic show in the world. And so the Logistics Managers Index is something that myself and a few other professors at different schools put together. And what we do is we go out and we talk to a few hundred supply chain professionals, director level and above, so they get the big picture every month. And we say inventory, transportation, warehousing going up. Prices and capacity, are they going up? Are they going down? Are they staying the same? And we come up with a change index. And essentially, any number above 50 means we're seeing growth. So increase in prices, increase in warehouse utilization. Any number below 50 means that we're seeing contraction. Okay. And so we do this every month, and we've done it for 4 years. This month, we saw a lot of growth actually in the logistics industry. We're up in the mid 60s, which is a place that we haven't been since late 2018. And a lot of it is driven by tightness, relevant to the reefer conference here. A lot of it is driven by tightness in warehousing and transportation capacity. It's really hard to find a truck or a warehouse, and especially a refrigerated one, and especially for downstream firms.
Yeah, so, we've discussed the LMI really starting to take off over the last couple of months. Transportation capacity tightening, warehouse capacity tightening, warehouse prices increasing, transportation prices increasing. That trend has continued probably since what, May, June? Is that accurate?
Yeah. So essentially, what happened with, say, transportation is we saw a big dip in April, right when sort of everything locked down, we weren't moving anything at all. And since then, it's been going up like a rocket. I mean, if we look at so again, remember, anything below 50 means shrinkage. Anything above 50 means growth. So if we look at April, it was a 37.7. So extreme contraction for transportation prices. It was easy to get a truck in April. If we look today, it's 87.9. So it's bumped up a full 50 points in like 6 months, which is crazy. And this is similar to what we saw in 2018, but it's different now because of capacity that has been removed since late 2018. I mean, all of you guys remember late 2019, early 2020, oh, this carrier is shutting down, these 3PLs aren't here anymore. And so we sort of built capacity up when we had the good times in 2018, and then we let capacity go, and now it came back way quicker than we thought it would. And so people are sort of scrambling to find trucks, essentially, to move things around, and especially downstream. So capacity, right, is for overall is a 23 this month, the lowest rating we've had in any metric in the 4 years we've been doing this. And for downstream, so consumer-facing firms like grocery stores or something like that, it's a 16. It's essentially there's no transportation available. We've never seen numbers like this before, and it's being driven by a couple things. Rise in e-commerce would be one. We're not going to the stores much anymore, and also a real tightness in honestly refrigeration.
And Zach, you mentioned some of those downstream impacts. Do you think food delivery services as well are being tightening up this reefer market right now?
In some ways, yes, but a lot of food delivery. I mean, if you mean like a Uber Eats kind of thing or something like that, I mean, a lot of that is sort of offline cars and things like that might not necessarily be refrigerated. What is driving it up, though, in terms of food, is that grocery stores have really shifted away from JIT. So when you teach just-in-time inventory in a class, you talk about grocery stores because there's usually such a quick turnover. They'll the Safeway distribution center in Denver empties out. They turn over their full produce warehouse every 3.5 days or every 4 days, basically. So I mean, the turns are incredible. We've moved away from that because of the trends that we've seen with COVID. So if you guys remember in April, March, when everybody was rushing out, one, there was a run on meat and a shortage in meat because so many meat packing plants went down. Like I think 12,000 meat packing plant workers had it in the first 2 months. So we had a big shortage there. And also people turned away from like fresh vegetables to frozen vegetables because we didn't want to keep going back to the store and things like that. And so grocery stores have had to move from, we turn things over every week, or I think for Kroger, for the whole thing, including like dry goods, like 4 weeks, they turn everything over. Now we saw people storing up turkeys in like June for Thanksgiving because they're so worried about, the next spike may be coming back. And it seems like we're sort of trending up again in the fall and the winter. And so people are going to have another rush looking for meat and frozen stuff. And as Zach Strickland and I were talking about earlier, no one is going to skip Thanksgiving. We will skip a lot of things, but everyone is going to have a turkey this year. And so it's actually become a big problem. Now, one of the things about turkeys that is different, in a normal year, people like an 18, 20-pound turkey because we're all here at grandma's house. This year, it's like 10 and 12 pounds are what people think the demand is going to be, because we're going to have more smaller Thanksgiving celebrations. So we need more turkeys and smaller turkeys, but we already grew all the big ones, and so those are sitting in storage somewhere. So it's really just things are moving so quickly. Grocery stores are having to have way more inventory on hand than normal, and it's just crushing the cold chain in terms of storage and transportation.
Yeah, I mean, nobody's skipping food here in America if they can get to it, that's for sure. You mentioned that they're switching away from this just-in-time environment for grocery warehousing, which obviously makes a lot of sense for something that has a small shelf life. How are they dealing with spoilage, and is that increasing, or is there some other alternative that they're having to deal with now that they didn't have before COVID?
So one of the things they're doing is they're moving away from to a smaller percentage of goods that can spoil. And so we're seeing grocery stores shift more from like, fresh broccoli to like canned broccoli or frozen broccoli. Now they're running into some hard ceilings on that. Canned vegetables right now it's like finding a 4-leaf clover for a grocery store. They're nowhere. They can't find canned vegetables anywhere. And so they're trying to move away because obviously, berries or anything like that that's going to spoil in a few days, there's nothing you can really do about that. But so they're trying to move more towards let's find things that can last, that can hang around for a while.
Yeah, so, how has this impacted the fresh produce? I mean, the produce season in the transportation market is one of the, I don't want to call it a holiday event, but it is certainly one that drives a lot of capacity tightness throughout the year, especially in the summer months out of California. Have we seen any decline in demand for the fresh produce, or has the consumer behavior really kept that in line as they're going to the grocery store more instead of going to the restaurants for the more of the manufactured processed food?
Right. So it's a weird tension because people are going to the grocery store more, right? I mean, grocery stores have been having a great time through this. But at the same time, what they're buying is slightly different. So they're buying more frozen stuff, more canned things. So the overall demand for vegetables may be fairly similar, but it's just because everything is up. If you look at it as a ratio to what people are buying, it's lower than it has been before.
Yeah.
And you saw, right? I mean, we saw in the summer farmers like destroying fields of squash and stuff like that.
Which is insane.
Yeah. Well, I mean, but it was partly because there was no one to pick it, right? So we couldn't have people come pick it. And so the supply of a lot of this, we ended up throwing away or whatever. And so supply was down anyway for some crops going into this fall.
Yeah, we saw a lot of that similarity in the meat producers as well, correct? Like they had to kill off like a whole crew of like hogs and beef and things like that because they just didn't have the space available to keep them. They had this huge glut and not enough people to process it.
Right. So meat, that it's a quick supply chain. Your Cargills, Tyson's, JPS, they're not necessarily set up to store tons and tons of meat. It needs to go through quickly. The other thing is they're set up so that the chickens have to be like a certain size to go through the plant. Like once a chicken or a hog gets too big, then it can't go through the plant anymore. And so it has to be like at a certain weight. Like once like a hog or something, once it gets over like 250 pounds or 200 pounds, I mean, depends on the plant, but it can't go through. Cows, ironically, you can actually slow roll a little bit. Like you can back the cows off and get them on some sort of Atkins situation where they're going to like gain weight slower. And so you can. So we didn't have as many of that, as much of that with cows because you can slow cows down the growth rate. But hogs and chickens, it's a lot harder to do. Plus,
Wow.
like I said before, 12,000 meat packing workers got COVID in the first 3 months, and so we had supply dip down like crazy, and because I mean, it's like a clock, right? If one gear gets taken out of the clock, the whole thing doesn't work anymore.
So, Zach, we've been covering a lot of domestic activity. Do you think there's going to be any kind of international tensions at play when we're looking at the cold chain?
Sure. Yeah, I do. Now, where we're really going to run into issues internationally, and it's like you guys were talking in the first segment about the jumbo jets thing and the vaccines. The vaccine distribution is going to be so challenging. The Moderna one, I think the Pfizer drug, they have to be stored at like minus 94 degrees Fahrenheit, which
Minus
is really, really
94. Like
minus 94 degrees Fahrenheit.
what's absolute zero? Negative 270 or something like that?
It's pretty. It's chilly, and some of them. I think the Johnson Johnson one could maybe be like negative 4 or something, but they're really really cold. And so think about I was reading the article. It's like, oh, we got to put a lot of dry ice on the planes. It's like, well, maybe something else too. I mean, so we got to transport this across to Europe or Africa or South America, wherever. And then the other issue is going to be distribution. So in the U.S., we're fortunate in that we have a pretty robust, pretty developed cold chain infrastructure. Think about those somewhere like a third world country. I mean, we don't have. I mean, some of those places don't even really have good highways, much less a ton of reefer capacity in terms of trucks and stuff. So distribution of this vaccine, I mean, everyone right now is really focused on, okay, let's get the vaccine. Can we get it made? But distributing it is going to be a real challenge, especially when we think internationally. Places like Africa, South America, Asia, Middle East, it's going to be really, really tough.
Yeah, that's going to definitely have, they're probably going to have to cut off some of those distances. The people are going to have to come to the vaccine. And, in America, we're used to having things come to us more often, for sure. But, I think you're making a good point because the vaccine itself is probably going to demand a lot of capacity, but it's not necessarily going to take up a lot of those 53 footers that we normally talk about here on Freightonomics. Is that accurate?
I think you're right about that. I think it'll be, smaller and it depends. I mean, how we're going to do it. I mean, I really don't know. Is it going to be vaccine centers? Or we're just going to ship a bunch to CVS or doctors' offices? I mean, and honestly, I don't think that we know yet. I don't know what the most effective way is going to be to get this to folks. You're right, though. We're not going to be putting them on 53 footers, with pallets and pallets just going all over the place. It's going to be, I think, a much more of a sort of micro targeting with the way we transport these around.
Yeah, do you think that there's going to be, some permanent changes to the supply chain, especially in the cold chain environment after all of the pandemic shakes out? We still have the presence, as Anthony mentioned, of international tensions with China on the trade front. Do you think that there's going to be anything that persists after the pandemic kind of eases its grip on the country?
Oh, sure. I mean, I really think that we're going to look back at the logistics industry as before COVID and after COVID. Now, all these changes might not stick around, but I think quite a few of them probably will. I mean, look at the way that just it's even taking the cold piece out of it. E-commerce is up 45% as a percentage of retail. That's not going to go away. E-commerce had been kind of growing like this, and now it's like this. And so, and same with like grocery delivery and things like that. Not a lot of people were ordering groceries on their phone, and now everybody's ordering groceries on their phone. And so consumers have learned, I think, that there's a lot of convenience, right? We've had to use these other systems that maybe, and I think some people already were, but maybe like, your parents, your grandparents weren't necessarily using these. Now they are. I don't know why they would stop using these. And so I think we're going to continue to see a real tightness in capacity and a real shift, honestly. we've already been moving from sort of brick and mortar retail to more of an e-commerce thing, right? And not just for retail, but all services. We've been moving towards digital, and a lot of that sort of digital infrastructure requires a logistics infrastructure to support it. And so things like warehouses, trucks, being able to move inventory around really quickly and really agilely, that's going to keep going up. And I think we're going to see a real shift in employment, like where people work is going to move from sort of retail service sectors to more logistics type jobs, and not just the people driving trucks and working in the warehouses, but a lot more analytics is going to have to come into this as well. So I think that really what COVID did, if we think about the logistics industry, is we were moving in one direction already, and then COVID like put rocket boosters on the back and just sped up. Maybe we skipped ahead 5 or 10 years from where we should, the pace we should have been. It's like we just went through a wormhole or something, and now we're 5 years down the road.
And Zach, you just mentioned it, talking about warehousing, looking at warehousing right now, especially downstream. Do you see or hear anything from your respondents in regards to potentially competing for different warehouse spacing? I mean, as you just mentioned, kind of getting closer to move inventory strategically throughout different locations. Harkening back to my previous comment with meal deliveries, not so much Uber Eats, but more like Blue Apron and things like that actually give full meals. So do you see anything specifically on your end, maybe more around warehousing, that would be impacted in the near term now?
Yeah. So warehousing capacity in September was a 43, and we've been mostly in the 40s. We hit 50.5 once during COVID. That's our high water mark, is not moving basically. But so we've been in contraction ever since COVID started. And prices, on the other hand, are in the 70s. And the reason for that is because, like we said earlier, we're moving more stuff forward, like Blue Apron, regular retail, all kinds of stuff. And people are really competing over the same space. And the space they're competing over is more expensive space. I know I've told the story on this show before that the warehouse I used to work in for Amazon, I had to drive past like wild bulls on the road to get there because it was out in the desert in the middle of nowhere. They don't build warehouses like that anymore. Now the warehouses are like in the suburbs of Denver. There's one 10 minutes down the road from me. They're near population centers, so we can get people stuff within a day or next day, same day, whatever. And those are the spaces that everyone's competing for. So not only do we not have enough warehouses, it's harder for us to build warehouses, the warehouse people want, because they're in urban areas. That's more difficult to do than out in the middle of the desert or the plains or wherever. And those warehouses are more expensive because it's more valuable real estate. And so we see all kinds of cross pressures right now on companies. They're competing for these warehouses, but it's really hard for them to find them. And one of the things that's so interesting that we actually see a lot of people doing is come up with new solutions, like rail cars we're using for storage now. It's cheaper to just rent out a train than have a warehouse. And also we're seeing a big uptick in like sharing platforms. So on demand warehouse space. I mean, I think Walmart this year is going to have like a ton of basically shared space from companies like Flex or something. So essentially we're building up our warehouse capacity just for the holiday season. So for those of listeners who aren't familiar with Flex, that's the kind of, it's like Airbnb for warehouses basically, where, okay, you have some space in the winter that you're not using. Maybe you sell, summer stuff or whatever. So I'll lease space inside your warehouse. And we're increasingly seeing people turn to that because there's not enough buildings for everyone to have their own building. And so a lot of companies that we talk to are moving from thinking about warehousing as, is this warehouse occupied? Yes or no? Because occupancy rates everywhere like 90%, and more towards, is the warehouse utilized or not? Because someone might be in the building, but if they're only using half of it, then maybe we can lease through one of these sharing platforms, lease some space in there. And this is especially true for our downstream respondents. Overall, warehousing utilization in September was a 71, which is pretty high. But for downstream respondents, it was a 78, whereas for upstream it was only 65. So consumer-facing companies are basically scrambling for any square foot they can find in a warehouse right now.
Yeah, and that's probably going to, do you anticipate some of these things having an impact on prices, obviously, as warehouse space and rent increases due to the competitive environment?
So right now, we're not seeing a ton of it get priced in. And that's partly because, I mean, there's so much competition right now. And the giant behind all of this, right, for retail is Amazon, right? Because Amazon has their own networks. And so they're not going to raise prices just because they're building more warehouses. Amazon has shown us for 20 years that they don't care if they lose money shipping you something. They'll make it up, providing server space for the company you work at. They don't care. And so it's hard right now for retailers and grocery and all that to really raise prices too much because of all of this competition. So at the moment, we haven't seen the price of logistics really impact the consumer too much.
Right. So, we've been talking a lot about the food and beverage side. There's obviously there's more to the cold chain than just food and beverage. The industrial sector's really been slow to get going throughout the pandemic. Do you foresee some sort of, maybe disruption down the road as the industrial sector starts to come back on? There's a lot of hazardous materials. Obviously, we've talked about the vaccine. Mm-hmm. There's other things like that really haven't been moving lately, like chemicals. Do you think that they're going to start competing for some of that space, making it even tighter here into 2021?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And that's been the thing that's really, I think, when people talk about the recovery, I remember in the summer, we were on here debating if it was going to be a V or a U, and it's a K, right? Some stuff is going up, some stuff is going back down, and industrial is sort of on the bottom slant, I guess, of that K. It's not going to stay there forever, though. The stimulus really only helped downstream, consumers, things like that. We haven't really been helping industrial. And honestly, we've been in an industrial slump since last year. We were in industrial slumping before COVID hit, and we're just seeing that slump continue because of the trade war and all kinds of stuff that was going on, right? So it's not going to stay slumped forever, though, especially I think if we do see additional stimulus, and if we see, trade regulations change, and a lot of this, I mean, who knows? The election will probably have a big impact on how quickly industrial comes back with tariffs and all kinds of stuff like that. If it does come, when it does come back, though, there will be competition. I mean, they're going, like you just said, they're going to need cold storage, they're going to need shipping, they're going to need warehousing. And so right now, retail and services and everything have kind of had the house to themselves, but mom and dad are coming back at some point, and so industrial is going to take up a lot of space, and how we're able to figure that out, I'm really interested to see. I mean, we're talking about all these numbers, all these really tight numbers, 16 for transportation, and these are the numbers from September, right? These aren't the numbers from November. These are the numbers from September. So I don't even know if we have enough space for what's going on right now. I mean, and you have seen, Amazon had Prime Day in October because they're freaked out about what's going to happen on Christmas Eve and Cyber Monday. So they're trying to spread this out as much as they can. But I mean, right now, the way it is, we do not have enough, even with 10 million people not having jobs right now, we just do not have enough logistics capacity to keep up with consumer demand.
Well, thank you for that, Zach. We are, we've only got a few seconds left, and, thanks for all the insight there. We are going to stay live throughout the day. We're going to have What the Truck and Dooner coming up here in a little bit. But again, a lot of interesting stuff from Dr. Zach Rogers. Anthony, real quick, we always end with a debate topic real fast. Favorite Halloween movie? Go.
Nightmare Before Christmas.
It's Hocus Pocus. Everybody knows that. No. What about you, Zach?
Probably no one even knows this movie. It's called Spaced Invaders. It's about these aliens who invade this little town on Halloween.
Nice. I like it. All right, everybody. Thanks for watching. Enjoy the event.
All right, good to see you guys. When am I going to get a blue shirt so I can match?
We'll send you a special edition.